Hi everyone, Ms. Hanks here. Today we're looking at part 3 of Unit 7, Industrial and Economic Development, Land Uses, and Patterns and Processes. It's a long name. And today's part is on gender inequality. So in your notes, I want you to take a moment to kind of write about these things and see them. So I want you to say what is one way that we see gender equality in the United States, and then I want you to counter it one way that we see gender inequality in the United States. And I really want you to think about it for a minute. Maybe it's ways that you've experienced it, maybe it's ways that you've seen it, maybe it's just ways that you've heard about. Okay. So our objective today is to describe gender inequality in the world. And our tidbit of the day is that Alaska is both the westernmost and the easternmost state, depending on where we're looking at, because it does cross over into the eastern hemisphere. Okay, so looking at gender inequality, we really see this in a whole lot of different ways. Sometimes it is monetarily, sometimes it's work over in and of itself, sometimes it's rights, sometimes it's just general treatment. There are all kinds of things that really factor into this concept of gender inequality. One thing to note is that women do typically about 66% of the world's work, but only own 1% of the world's property. Remember that women only make up 50% of the population, so neither of these things really is very balanced. Last year, more than 14 million girls were child brides, married under the age of 18, and it's often under the age of 15. Childbirth is the leading cause of death, girls aged 15 to 19. So for most of you your age, or about your age. Every year, 60 million girls are assaulted on their way to school. Remember that assault means a lot of different things. It's not necessarily the most extreme in what we would think of as rape, but it's still a violation of, in this case, her body, her rights, and her autonomy. 70 million girls across the globe aged 6 to 12 do not attend school. So gender inequality measures. We look at a few different things, and one thing to really note is that just because a country is developed doesn't mean that everyone experiences that. So we see this in general with development. There are some regions of certain countries, including the United States, that are, while the country may be quite developed, the other parts of the country are very, very undeveloped or very poorly developed. But gender is one of the ways that we really see this come out. Or the concept of gender equity is the process of allocating resources, programs, and decision making to both males and females and addressing any imbalances in the benefits. We usually use the term equality. Equity is a better word. Equity means that everyone gets what they need. And women and men need different things. So if we talk about doctors, women and men need different access to healthcare. They have different parts. They have different needs. For example, men don't go through childbirth. They don't go through pregnancy. So having a doctor that is equipped to take care of those things, and not all of them are, is really important for a woman's health. Looking at empowerment, and again, empowerment means a lot of different things, but one of the major ways that women can achieve economic and political empowerment, or some of the major ways that they can achieve it, are things like having political power. I mean, that's not the way that you achieve it, but having increasing the percentage of women in political positions. So in a legislature like Congress. In the United States, we have approximately 50% women, but only about 24 to 25% of our legislature is female. Finishing high school is going to give a woman a lot more both economic and political power. She's better equipped to understand political issues. The more educated you are, the more that you understand issues, but she's also more equipped to get better paying jobs if she's finished high school. Regarding that, and looking at the literacy rate. So the literacy rate is the percentage of the population that can read and write, and it is typically much lower in girls than it is in boys, or women than men. In low-income countries, for example, and this is just kind of a repeat of that previous information, for every 100 boys who continue their education after high school, only 55 girls do the same. That's assuming that they've all completed high school, theoretically, but that isn't necessarily the case either. I will link this video down below so that you can watch it. Please take the time. There are several videos in here. I'll give a warning. There is one of them that uses some strong language, but it does use it to kind of explain what's going on. But take the time to watch these. These are really, really important videos, really poignant videos. And they really show kind of what girls go through, sometimes in the United States, sometimes in other places, including developed countries. All right. So just some general information. The adult literacy rate has risen to about 84% globally, but with that, women do account for about 60% of the illiterate population in the world. So even though our literacy rate overall has gone up, women still make up the largest majority of those who cannot read and write. In developed countries, literacy rate is about 99%. In developing countries, it's about 75%, and again, we're talking for women. And in our least developed countries, only about 51% of women can read and write. With education, most regions of the world have at least achieved gender parity, gender equality in primary education. So little kids are going to elementary school in fairly equal numbers, boys and girls. But as we start to get into secondary and tertiary schools or post-secondary schools, colleges and things, that number drops dramatically. We start to see quite a significant disparity between boys and girls. So at the tertiary level, this one gives us slightly different information, or slightly more information specific to sub-Saharan Africa. For every 100 boys who are going to a tertiary level of education, post-high school, only 64 girls are doing so. In politics, even though the percentage of women has doubled in the last 20 years, we still only have about 22% female legislators, particularly in developed countries. So from 1917 to 2014, this does not include our most recent elections, which have been historic in the number of women and women of color, people of color in general, who have been elected to Congress in the United States. Does not include those, but we're still, even with them, we're looking at 24%. This is what we're looking at. So blue is Democratic, red is Republican, and then our gray box is Senate. And these are the number of women over time. And again, 114th Congress, we're still looking at here 80.6% male in the House, 19.4% female in the Senate, and also in the House, in the Senate, 80% male, 20% female. So roughly the same. This is not the current Congress. We're a little bit higher now, but not dramatically so. So I want you to take a couple moments in your notes and pause the video here. But 50% of Americans are women, but only about 20% of legislators are, about 25 now, so slightly more updated. Why aren't women able to achieve political equality in the United States? So take a moment and speculate. Make some notes for yourself. This is just your thoughts. But pause the video here. So looking at the labor force, and this is women working outside the home, what percentage of working citizens are female? Okay. So this is a difficult number to gauge because in many parts of the world, what we consider women's work is not counted. And on average, women around the world spend twice as many hours doing unpaid work as men do. This is stuff like housework, childcare, even sometimes farm work, and other things that might be unpaid. This is going to disallow many women from joining the paid labor force. So I said labor force in general is outside the home. It's not. Labor force is everybody working, but the paid labor force. And that's pretty important because women are still responsible for the majority of housework. They still have all of the things associated with that. And they don't have autonomy. So if their husband dies, they may still be unable, they're probably especially unable to join the paid labor force unless they have children who are old enough to run the house. If the man in the house leaves, if he doesn't exist, they may not be able to join the paid labor force. And even if they are, they're often paid much less than men are. And again, I will post this video down below. Each of the videos linked in here, I'm going to post down below. Please watch them. Okay. With reproductive health, this is one of the most significant points that we see because we're literally talking about lives here. Women die at generally much higher rates than men, especially in developed countries. And this is accounted for through a few things, particularly with reproductive health. So the maternal mortality rate is the number of women who die per 1,000 births. In developed countries, we wouldn't expect this number to be very high. The United States actually has a higher rate than most other developed countries. In less developed countries, it's fairly high. We also look at the adolescent fertility rate. This is the number of births per 1,000 women between ages 15 to 19. Our maternal mortality rates are typically going to be much higher if our adolescent fertility rate is higher, in part because these typically are less developed countries, in part because adolescents are less equipped to give birth safely. Their bodies are still developing, so pregnancy tends to be exceptionally harsh on adolescent bodies. As a result of contraceptive use, there are 26 million fewer unsafe abortions in the world's poorest countries. Women across the world currently bear the majority of childcare. This goes back to that previous one with women in the labor force. And according to the United Nations Foundation, at least 250,000 maternal deaths and as many as 1.7 million newborn deaths would be averted if the need for both family planning and maternal and newborn health services were met. So family planning usually refers to access to contraceptives, to safe access to abortions, things like that, and the maternal and newborn health services. 250,000 maternal deaths and 1.7 million newborn deaths. I really want you to think about those numbers. So worldwide, we have 45% fewer maternal deaths worldwide than we did in 1990, but we still have 800 women per day who are dying of preventable pregnancy-related causes. 99% of these deaths are occurring in developing countries. 800 women a day is a lot of women. Looking at female genital mutilation. You might also hear this termed as female circumcision. 133 million girls and women have experienced female genital mutilation in the 29 countries in Africa and the Middle East where this practice is still most common, where it is most common. This leads to quite a lot of things, some really, really harsh impacts. So it causes severe emotional and physical trauma. It is the removal of all external genitalia on a woman that is meant to remove any sense of pleasure from sexual intercourse. It is meant to make it so it is physically painful, essentially to keep a woman from cheating on her husband. There are a lot of potential health risks, including reproductive and sexual health complications, and there is possible death through blood loss and sepsis or infection. The counter to this is that for many cultures, this is considered a necessary practice and is usually carried out by the mothers and grandmothers in the culture, but considered necessary for a girl to be considered marriageable. So it is one of those things that's kind of difficult to say that it's not allowed, but it's also difficult to have it happen. So the UN Women is a non-governmental organization that works towards gender equality and empowerment of women internationally. So it's a derivative of the United Nations. It's a segment of that. We know an NGO, we've talked about these before, and it's any non-profit voluntary citizens group which is organized on a local, national, or international level. Basically, it is not associated with the government of a country, and usually it is multinational or at least away from that nation or government in any case. So let's look at maternity leave, paid maternity leave particularly. In the United States, we have 0 weeks of required paid maternity leave. Some companies offer it, but as a whole, the United States does not require any paid maternity leave. You are required to give maternity leave, 6 weeks, but it is not required to be paid. Canada offers 50 weeks. Norway has 44, and we're talking, again, paid weeks of maternity leave. Italy has 22, the United Kingdom has 20, and I want you to think about how many months this is, so 20 weeks is approximately 5 months. Denmark has 18, Venezuela 18, France, Spain, and the Netherlands are all 16. Germany and Japan are both 14. Mexico, South Africa, and Pakistan all have 12. We typically don't really think of Pakistan as being that developed. We often would not consider it to have a lot of gender equity, and yet they're offering approximately 3 months of paid maternity leave when the United States offers 0. So looking at this as a map, the darkest blue is countries with paid maternity leave 26 weeks or more. The mid-grade blue is 14 to 25 weeks, the lightest blue is less than 14 weeks, and the red is no paid maternity leaves. So the United States is one of only 8 countries out of 188 that have known policies without paid leave. We're up there with Suriname, Liberia, Papua New Guinea, Western Samoa, Tonga. Look at Africa. We look at their paid maternity leave. Or Latin America. Or basically all of Asia. Again, I'm going to post this online. So why don't we have paid maternity leave in the United States? Patriarchy is not an acceptable answer. I want you to really think about it and get some details in there. And why is it important? Why do we care? What does it do? Why would we want it or not want paid maternity leave in the US? What happens if we do have it versus if we don't? Okay. So, looking at gender discrimination, it is encoded into law in countries all across the world, and I'm going to give you a few examples here. So there are 113 countries that do not have laws to ensure equal pay for equal work among men and women. 104 countries make certain jobs off limits for women. 39 countries have laws that mean a daughter cannot inherit the same portion of assets as a son. So if her parent dies, the boy has to get more than she does. 36 countries limit what wives can inherit from their husbands. 29 countries restrict the hours that women can work. 18 countries allow men to prohibit their wives from working. 17 countries limit when and how women can travel outside the home. This is often you would need a husband's, father's, or brother's permission to travel outside of your home. In the United States, this goes back to that reproductive health. Pregnancy loss is actually criminalized in some states in the US, and this would be miscarriage, abortion, things like that. And authorities have used loopholes to prosecute women in cases of miscarriage. So a miscarriage would be what we also refer to as a spontaneous abortion. It is your body essentially stops being pregnant. This isn't you get medical intervention. This is, for whatever reason, the pregnancy is no longer viable and your body is rejecting it. Okay? Usually due to something like chromosomal defects. Especially, this is used to prosecute women when women are unfamiliar with the laws. So, for example, some of these things have happened to women who are immigrants, who are very unfamiliar with U.S. laws and very unfamiliar with state laws in particular. And that can be used very much to disadvantage the women. In June of 2018, there was a woman in Alabama who was shot and lost her 5-month fetus. She was indicted by an Alabama grand jury on charges of manslaughter and faced up to 20 years in prison. She had activists, lawyers, and public backlash that all kind of came together and worked and ultimately managed to get her charges dropped. She was charged with manslaughter because she got in a fight. And basically the jury said, you knowingly cost your child's life, your fetus's life, because you got in a fight. So in Arkansas, 5 women total have been arrested for stillbirth or miscarriage. Stillbirth would be when a pregnancy would be considered viable. If a woman were to give birth at that time, the baby could theoretically live. A miscarriage would be before that point. And 3 of them happened from 1884 to 1994. One woman was arrested in 2015 and another one in 2016. And in 2016, a woman in Virginia had a stillbirth at home, and an autopsy that was performed on the fetus showed that it had died in utero. It was a true stillbirth, but she was arrested for concealing a dead body and sentenced to 5 months in prison. Globally, 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual violence at some point in their life. That means that almost exclusively someone that you know has experienced physical or sexual violence, some woman. And I'm going to put this infographic up. We're going to look at it real quick. It is a little bit difficult to look at like this, so I am going to post it, the link for it in the description box, so make sure you check it out because there's some really interesting and important stuff on it. So remember that it is an infographic. Click on it. Look at things. So please make sure you go in and check that whole thing out. There's some really, really important information in there. Okay. Again, I'm going to put this in the description. This is especially important. I really want my boys to make sure that you're watching this because a lot of the time you don't have the personal experience with it. So it's a little bit easy to not think about it. Or even at times to allow this stuff to happen around you, because sometimes it starts with those jokes and things. And I really want you guys to be aware of it. And that can be difficult. And especially looking at this on your own, please make sure you're taking the time to do it. So looking at the dangers of language, we know words are important, words matter. Language reflects and molds culture, and it can be bad for everyone. So the word feminist. The word feminist has a lot of negative connotations for a lot of people. It's used as a slur. Sometimes we might hear that word feminazi, which is a way of describing, a particularly nasty way of describing someone who is very extreme in their beliefs. But we use it, many people use it as an insult. And a feminist, strictly speaking, is someone who advocates for equal political, economic, cultural, and social rights between men and women. Feminism is not about saying that women are better than men. It is about having these equal rights as men. And that means that it's good for men and women. Equal rights are good for everyone. So I want you to take a moment and just really think about this. You don't have to do this on a piece of paper, but I want you to consider if you considered yourself a feminist before this lesson, and if you consider yourself one now. And if not, why don't you want equality between genders? Because I want you to think about that actual definition of feminism. What would be the reason for not wanting equality between genders? Okay, this one is the one I'm going to give a warning to ahead of time, just because it does use a couple of words, but it's a very, very good video about the way that language matters, and particularly around the way that stuff like locker room talk matters. So take some time, watch this. Just be aware that there are a couple of words in here that are not very nice words. They're used to show how women are referred to. And if you have a woman in your life, and you probably do at some point, she's probably been called some of these words, maybe not all of them, but I know for me personally, I have experienced quite a bit of this. Most women have, even if they don't talk about it. And then this last one is about boys, and it's about the way that gender inequality negatively affects boys. So I want you to take the time, watch this, because it's really, really important. All right, so to summarize, I want you to describe the impact of gender equity on a developing country, and use at least 3 vocab words from this chapter or this unit to help you do that. Okay, that is it for today. Make sure you go down below and click on the links for those videos, watch those, and that infographic. Make sure you go back and rewatch anything that you missed. Make sure you're reading in your text, and let me know if you have any questions. Have a great day. Bye.